You are alone, and it is getting dark. You hear it before you see it, a cough, low, wet, somewhere in the tall grass, maybe 30 feet away. You don't move. It coughs again, closer. Here's what's actually stalking you: a cave lion, Panthera spelaea, roughly 25% bigger than the lions alive today. It has never once in its life been afraid of something that walks on two legs. Why would it be? For most of the last 400,000 years, you were just slower, softer meat that happened to stand upright. It doesn't rush you yet. Cats like this don't waste energy. It watches. It waits for you to make the mistake of running, because running is what prey does, and prey is what you look like right now. So you don't run. You do the only thing that might work. You back toward the fire. That's the whole story of early human survival, actually. Not one dramatic stand, just over and over figuring out the smallest thing that might buy you another night. Somewhere tonight, in parts of Africa, a lion will still take down something twice its size in under a minute. 40,000 years ago, that something could have been your grandfather. We were not the strongest predator in this story. We weren't close. No claws worth mentioning, no real speed, skin you could open with a stick. On paper, we should have been a footnote in some bigger animal's food chain, a snack, and not even a memorable one. So, how are you here? Not because we got tougher. Predators like the cave lion, Smilodon, the short-faced hyena, all of them could still kill an individual human without much effort. What changed wasn't our bodies, it was something else entirely, and it shows up first as a smudge of ash in a South African cave. At Wonderwerk Cave, researchers found burned bone and ash dated to roughly 1 million years ago, evidence of one of the earliest known managed hearths. Not a wildfire that happened to pass through, a fire someone kept alive on purpose, tucked where the wind couldn't reach it. Think about what that actually does. A predator that has never once hesitated around a human suddenly hesitates around light, around smoke, around heat it can't outstare. The animal's instincts haven't changed at all. Its calculation has. And that's the twist most people miss. Fire probably changed how predators treated us before it ever changed what we ate. We usually tell this story as, then we learned to cook. But the scarier, more interesting version is that a cave lion started rethinking whether you were worth the trouble long before you'd figured out how to roast anything on that flame. One fire, one hesitation, that's the entire hinge this story turns on. But a fire pit alone doesn't explain the next few 100,000 years. It bought time, it didn't win the war. What wins the war is something almost embarrassing in how simple it sounds. We started planning. Across Africa and Europe, in completely different eras, archaeologists keep finding the same idea showing up again and again. Not identical objects, the same instinct. At a site called Schöningen in Germany, wooden spears nearly 300,000 years old, weighted and balanced almost like a modern javelin. At Kathu in South Africa, stone points 500,000 years old, chipped in a way that only makes sense if they were mounted onto shafts. At Blombos Cave, engraved ochre and bone tools, 70,000 years old, made by hands that weren't just solving today's problem, they were thinking ahead to tomorrow's. Different continents, different tools, same underlying move. Prepare now for a threat that hasn't arrived yet. That's not instinct. Animals react. This is something else. Here's a detail that should stop you for a second. At several early campsites, the layout isn't random. Clear sightlines, controlled entry points. Positioned near water, but never in open grassland where anything could walk up on you from 3 directions at once. Someone chose that ground the way a general chooses a hill. Now picture the split-screen version of this. On one side, a pride of lions moving as a coordinated unit, cutting off herds' escape routes with terrifying precision. On the other side, a small band of humans doing something eerily similar, with sticks and firelight and a well-picked cave mouth. Two very different species arriving at the same solution. Position matters more than power. And here's the part that flips the whole predator story on its head. Lions weren't just afraid of a human with a spear. Multiple behavioral studies on modern lion populations near humans suggest something stranger, that lions treat a coordinated group of humans as more dangerous than an armed individual, because the group behaves unpredictably, moves with purpose, and doesn't scatter the way frightened prey does. A lion can read fear. It's much worse at reading teamwork. So the sharpened stick was never really the weapon. The stick just bought you 3 extra seconds. The weapon was the version of you that wasn't standing there alone.
But here's where it gets interesting, and it has nothing to do with weapons at all. At a cave site in Spain called Cima de los Huesos, over 400,000 years old, archaeologists found the remains of at least 28 people deliberately placed deep inside the cave. Far from any living area, no tools down there, no food remains, nothing that explains why anyone would go that deep, except one reason. Someone carried them there on purpose. Sit with that for a second. In a world where every single night could end you, where a moment of distraction meant a hyena's jaw closing around your leg, someone still spent time and energy honoring a body that could no longer hunt, gather, or fight. That decision doesn't help you survive tomorrow. It shouldn't exist yet, biologically speaking. And there it is, 400,000 years ago, in the dark. This is the part that should genuinely surprise you. We usually picture our ancestors as pure survival machines, every action justified by calories or safety. But grief, it turns out, might be older than agriculture, older than language as we understand it, possibly older than the modern human skull. And it wasn't just about the dead. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy has pointed to something called alloparenting, where childcare wasn't only the mother's job, but shared across the group. That single shift meant more adults free to stay alert, forage, or fight off a threat at the same moment, instead of one exhausted parent trying to do everything alone. It sounds small. It might be one of the biggest survival advantages we ever stumbled into, and it left almost no trace in the fossil record, because kindness doesn't fossilize the way a spear tip does. Wait, before this turns into a story about how humans were secretly wonderful all along, here's the part that complicates everything. At Gran Dolina in Spain, roughly 800,000 years old, researchers found cut marks on hominin bones consistent with cannibalism, not an isolated freak case either. Similar patterns turn up at other sites across different time periods. So the same species capable of carrying a body 400,000 years for the sake of grief was also, elsewhere, capable of turning on its own when the food ran out. Same brain, same instincts, completely different outcome depending on how desperate the moment was. That's the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath this whole story. Cooperation didn't come from being good, it came from being useful more often than not, and when it stopped being useful, some groups dropped it instantly. And yet, somehow, cooperation won more than it lost, often enough that you exist. Think about what actually had to line up. A cave mouth shaped just right for a hearth at Wonderwerk, a group willing to spend real time shaping wood into something that could kill from a distance, a band at Cima de los Huesos who looked at someone who could no longer contribute anything and decided to carry them anyway. None of that beats a cave lion by itself. Stacked across hundreds of thousands of years, spread over thousands of generations, it adds up to something that finally could. Here's the strange part nobody tells you. The predators didn't lose because we got stronger. They lost because we got harder to read. A lone human panics, and panic is predictable, and predictable things get killed efficiently. A group with fire, a plan, and something to lose stops behaving like prey at all, and prey is the only thing a predator's whole nervous system knows how to hunt. The cave lion is gone, extinct, roughly 13,000 years now. Smilodon, gone. The short-faced hyena, gone. Every predator that once treated us as an easy meal has vanished, and the soft-skinned, badly armed, slow-running primate they used to hunt is still here, building cities over the ground where they once stalked us at night. That was never about strength. We never had any. It was about a species that figured out, purely by trial and fire-lit error, that a fire kept burning through the night, a body carried out of love instead of use, and a group that simply refused to scatter could outsurvive teeth, claws, and raw power every single time. You're not descended from the fastest human who ever lived. You're descended from the ones who were never facing the dark alone. And maybe that's still the thing deciding who makes it and who doesn't.